there any other members here?
You were terrific last night. Everybody is so proud of you.
I was angry, I guess you can tell.
Yeah, but you were eloquent.
Thank you.
This is Joe Madison with the NAACP.
Charlie's here.
Charlie Hayes.
Good morning. My name is Maxine Waters, Congresswoman from the 29th Congressional District in Los Angeles, the scene of the early fires that you witnessed on national television last night. With me are members of the Congressional Black Caucus and a representative from the NAACP, and we're here this morning to express our outrage and our extreme concern about the unfair verdict in the case of Rodney King last evening in Simi Valley. Each of the members here will have an opportunity to make a statement expressing their feelings and their concern. Allow me to start this press conference by telling you that I am angry. I am outraged. I think there has been a miscarriage of justice, and I suppose I should have known once there was a change of venue and that trial was moved to basically an all-white community, a community where over 2,000 Los Angeles police officers reside, that the chances for justice were going to be slim. But I suppose I was foolish enough to believe that given the very graphic depiction of the beating of Rodney King captured on video, that there would be an undeniable assignment of responsibility to those who had in fact beat him. Unfortunately, we saw a verdict that I have no problems in identifying as a racist verdict, where the jurors in this case is trying to make us believe we have not seen what we have seen with the video. I don't care how it is framed and what spin is attempted in the description of that video by those jurors. The fact of the matter is, we in America witnessed the brutal beating of Rodney King. I feel there should have been convictions for all of them, literally, to be allowed to get away without a conviction, and only one instance of perhaps a mistrial is a travesty. Today, I and Congressman Ford and Reverend Jackson met with Attorney General Barr. We first asked about the report and the investigation that they were supposed to have done as a result of the meeting with the Congressional Black Caucus after the Rodney King beating. We were told that they in fact had done an investigation. They still have not completed it. It was national in scope, and that did not speak directly to the Rodney King beating. They have been monitoring this case, we have been told. Their team is in Los Angeles at this time, and they are gathering the information by which to make a determination about whether or not they can prosecute. They have to wait until after the trial had taken place in Los Angeles, and now they are free to make a determination about whether to prosecute under the civil rights laws of this country. They have two laws, conspiracy to violate civil rights and violation of civil rights statutes, that they can prosecute under. We urge them to prosecute, and we urge them to move with all due speed, with all due haste to do so. I indicated that I thought that the situation not only in Los Angeles is very volatile and it is not going to subside easily, but I still think there's an opportunity this weekend for it to spill over into other communities in this country. We tried to urge them to move not only quickly, but to understand the danger that we're confronted with. As I stand here, 9 people are dead. My last count this morning, before I tried to get some sleep, was over 50-something fires raging all over Los Angeles. The fires started in my district, and one of the largest was right around the corner from my house. There are scores of injuries and still anger and frustration, and people who plan on staying on the streets and expressing their outrage and anger in any way they deem necessary. There are those who would like for me and others and all of us to tell people to go inside, to be peaceful, that they have to accept the verdict. I accept the responsibility of asking people not to endanger their lives. I am not asking people not to be angry. I am angry, and I have a right to that anger, and the people out there have a right to that anger. We don't want anybody killed. None of us believe in violence, but there are some angry people in America, and young black males in my district are feeling at this moment, if they could not get a conviction with the Rodney King video available to the jurors, that there can be no justice in America. I would ask the individual members of the Black Caucus to step forward and share their concerns with you at this moment. Please.
I'm Congressman Floyd Flake from New York, Queens, 6th Congressional District. I think that all of us this morning find ourselves in a position where, as we do an examination of what has happened in the Rodney King case and put it in the backdrop of history that has historically developed in relationship to such cases, whether they're in New York or Los Angeles or anywhere else, find ourselves having to believe that this was a morally repugnant decision on the part of this jury. It would seem to me to suggest that it is almost impossible unless one is in a situation where there has been a determination by either a judge or by someone that says that this is going to be a fair trial regardless. The changing of venue clearly indicated that this could not possibly be a fair trial for Rodney King. I think it is a sad day for America. We talk about the exportation of our democracy and talk about a new world order. The question is, what does it really mean? Does it mean that all of our citizens will find themselves included in that order, or does it mean that there will be a circling of the camp of those who feel themselves included, while at the same time those who have historically been excluded will continue to be so? It is a moral outrage. The anger is not only in Los Angeles, the anger is all over this nation. The anger is among those of us who are part of this body, not just because we are black members, but because we realize that if this kind of event could happen to Rodney King on video, all of our lives, those of us who stand here this morning, could have been in that same position that he was in. Let me share with you a personal sense of my own feeling after 11 or 12 o'clock at night, going home by myself in my car, knowing that I could be stopped and that I could be a Rodney King and that I would not have to have committed a crime to have been on the same ground that he was on. So when Rodney King was on the ground getting beat, we were all on the ground getting beat. That's the reason we're angry. That's the reason we're outraged.
All right.
There are some people, especially those in the press, that sometimes appear shocked when we say that it wasn't just a racist act of the police, but it was the racist act of the jury. Perhaps this shock could be more easily eliminated if we would ask ourselves as Americans, what would the outcome have been if these were African American policemen and the victim was white? There is absolutely no question in anybody's mind that it would have been the opposite effect.
That's right.
So what we have to do is to make certain that the standard that has been used by the police department in Los Angeles, that has been supported by a racist police chief, a racist jury, is not the standard that America is willing to say is our standard. The policeman testified that this is how you treat American citizens. Isn't it time that the Congress, that the President of the United States, that whites join with blacks, that Jews join with Christians and say, not in our United States do we allow this. What would happen if black policemen believe that this is the way to treat white wrongdoers? Are we giving license to police to take away the rights of our individuals? I just hope that the 9 lives that have been lost in Los Angeles have not been lost in vain. And I hope that the presidents of these United States, the leader of the so-called New World Order, the leader of the free world, will find some compassion and love for the people in the United States that he can say, not in our country, you don't.
I'm Lucian Blackwell. From Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and certainly we're all outraged by what happened yesterday. But I think we have to keep this thing in perspective so that this country does not go up in flames. We had 4 policemen who violated the law, 4 policemen. And no one must suffer because of what a scientifically picked jury did. This is the day when you pick the jury scientifically to get a desired result. And that's what you got in California. But a little old lady walking down the street did nothing. A little old man walking down the street did nothing. And so we must lead, leaders must lead right now and say to our people, do not beat up on people and burn your own neighborhoods down. You did nothing. We have to find a way to bring these policemen to justice. 95% of the policemen in this country are decent people. You have this 5% that decides that they can violate the law anytime that they want to, and it has to stop. But let's make sure that we keep the lid on in America. Let's not inflame America and treat people who are not involved in this problem as though they did it. 4 policemen did it. 4 policemen violated the law. Let's deal with that, and let's not burn down America, but let's build up America and make sure that the president leads, the Congress leads, and we have to go to California to do something. Let's go.
I'm with you. I'm with you. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. I'm also here to add my support to Congresswoman Waters about this travesty on justice in America. You know, I received a call on the way out of my office from BBC. Now, the last time BBC called me was when Nelson Mandela was released from prison. And so we kind of take a look at how the United States of America is viewed in the world when a situation like this occurs. But you know, when I was young, I heard the talk about we have this great nation from sea to shining sea. And I'm from New Jersey, and this is California, but let me tell you what happened on the East Coast just 2 months ago. A similarly picked jury acquitted a policeman who shot a 14-year-old in the back in Teaneck, New Jersey. He was also tried by the same type of jury that tried those 4 policemen in California and came up with that verdict on yesterday. Gary Spratt, the policeman in Teaneck, New Jersey, was found not guilty when everyone there said the boy had his hands up in the air and he was shot in the back. That happened in New Jersey. This is in California, and so we know that the length and the breadth of this nation, injustice is happening. Back in '68, the Kerner Commission report said that we have 2 nations, separate and unequal. Justice is dispensed unequally. What happened in New Jersey last month is what happened in California on yesterday. It must stop. We must have leadership from the president, from the Justice Department. We must see that justice must be done.
All right.
I stand here by my colleagues in the Congress as one who, at the end of this year, will no longer be here. But I will still be in the struggle for justice on the outside of the Congress. This, to me, is a clear-cut example of the system of justice transmitting injustice. I am sick and tired of the efforts of some, including members of this lawmaking body here on Capitol Hill, trying to return us back to the days that existed during the time of Martin Luther King. I happen to be one of those who marched with Martin Luther King in the South and North, trying to make democracy work. Here you got a clear-cut example where the victim, who happened to be black, is the one who's convicted, and those who perpetrated injustice on him turned to loose free and would be made to look like heroes if we don't speak out. God knows. It's not enough just to say, I don't justify, I was a part of the nonviolent procedures that Martin Luther King advocated, but how much can people take? They aren't fools, and we ought to quit trying to paint them as being that. We need to make democracy work in America as we try to so-called spread it in Russia or some other countries. We need democracy here, fair treatment, and the system of justice ought to be the one that leads it. But even here, as members of this Congress, I am a victim of what I consider to be injustice. I'm not here to discuss it with you, but God knows. But to put the person who was appointed to the bar by Reagan years ago and by Nixon, and he the one who tried to cover up Nixon in the situation that occurred right here on Capitol Hill, he's the one who's going to have charge of investigating us on the so-called check bouncing scheme. That to me is something that I'm going to fight against if I have to take every cent I can raise to go into court to make sure that people have some modicum of justice here in this country of ours. God knows Los Angeles is only, 3,000 miles away from Chicago, where I live. I was a witness to some of the things that occurred when Martin Luther King was murdered. And the people who perpetrated and planned his death had never been brought to the bar of justice. Check it out for yourself. And we think you here in the media ought to sometime report some things as they are. We don't need to misinform and mislead people. And this is what the effort is trying to be made here through a police department was brutal. They convicted the man right on the ground before the eyes of people over video of that tape that was showed on video. And Lord knows, we need to say to the President of the United States and to the Secretary of our Department of Justice, it's time to stop shucking and jiving and make sure that equality exists here in this great nation of ours, which does not exist if it's going to be administered in this fashion. I want to thank you very much.
I'm Joseph Madison. I represent the National NAACP as a national board member and have asked to be here by our chairman, William Gibson, and the executive director, Benjamin Hooks. I think beside the verdict being absurd, the most absurd thing that has ever been said about this case came from the jurors' mouths themselves that have been interviewed and who said that Rodney King was in control of his own beating throughout the entire time that that videotape was run, that he in fact directed the beating. I never once saw on that video Rodney King acting as a director asking to be beat. I never once saw on that video Rodney King laying prone on the ground, flat, struggling to gain his composure and his balance, calling for his head to be beaten as if someone was trying to tenderize meat. It is absurd for jurors to suggest that he was in direction of his own beating. Second, it is also absurd to suggest that 4 police officers are innocent when referring to Rodney King, including their defense attorney, in animalistic terms. Big, growly, bear type of individual who was on PCP, who was on drugs, we are all allowed a drug test to determine whether one is or is not on drugs. I think this whole thing is absurd. I think it's been absurd since Ronald Reagan took office and when he made America feel comfortable with their racism. I think it was absurd when Ronald Reagan never invited the members of this distinguished body, the Congressional Black Caucus, to meet one time in his entire administration to discuss the problems that we now have seen come to a head. And the Bush administration has continued that line of thinking and reasoning. The NAACP is in full support of Maxine Waters and this Congressional Black Caucus. Our total resources, our total membership, our lawyers, our board members, our executives will work with this organization and these individuals to see that justice is done. Not only should this trial be investigated, but the appellate process should be investigated that moved that trial from Los Angeles County to that change of venue in the first place. The judges involved from the bottom on up should be investigated as it relates to this case. I am suggesting to you as I stand here as a young black man, whether it's wearing a tie or as my young son wears a Malcolm X cap, we're all in danger. Absolutely. It makes no difference whether you're a professional, a Baptist, a Catholic, whatever your background may be. What has been proven in this case is that the life of a young black man is not worth a bucket of spit in America. This has taken us back practically to the Dred Scott era. Absolutely. Of where our lives simply don't count. So Maxine, you can consider the NAACP, as always, on board with full cooperation with all our resources.
Yes.
Have you had any discussions with President Bush, either on the telephone or has there been any?
President Bush does not talk to us. Let's be straight about this. We have no access to the White House. We had one meeting since I have been in Congress with the president. It was pro forma, it was courtesy, but there is no relationship, and he has not been in contact with us. We do not enjoy the kind of relationship that would allow elected members of this Congress to be in touch with the White House.
Going back to your earlier statement about your request for justice to now file charges against these four officers under the Civil Rights Act. If that does not happen immediately, were you saying then that you think that alone would be enough to either stop the violence, or failing that there will be more violence tonight, this weekend?
Well, let me just tell you, I think that immediately we need an indication from the President of the United States that he's encouraging his Justice Department to prosecute. We need some leadership from the highest level. For a president that does not normally pay very much attention to domestic matters, we're asking him to be uncharacteristic and do so in this case. We're asking him to use leadership to say to this nation that he believes there has been injustice, and we're asking him to speak directly to the young black males and tell them that their lives are valued in this country. We want some leadership. We want the Justice Department to prosecute. We want them to move with all due haste. Perhaps that will help stem the tide of violence. In addition to that, we really do need to look at further how we can have laws in this country that will supersede some of these jurisdictions that in fact are racist and backwards and some other kinds of things, who fail to prosecute officers who violate human beings and who abuse them and violate them. So we need to do all of these things. We need to organize and work with our communities to say that We need to put measures on the ballot in some of these local communities. We need to strengthen our ability to vote and to override the city councils, many of whom are racist, who do not act on our behalves. We're not going to stop working. I have been fighting Daryl Gates for 14 years. I called for his resignation after the killing of Eula Love, a young black woman who was shot down on her porch about a $29 gas bill. This man has been a lightning rod. His siege mentality has permeated the Los Angeles Police Department. He has to accept responsibility in the actions of those officers. Officers don't act that way if they think something is going to happen to them, if they think they're going to be disciplined. What are we going to do? Everything. Yes.
I wanted to ask also sort of a follow-up on that. When you were talking to Barr, it sounded as if Barr has saying they haven't finished their investigation, therefore today they probably will not say they're going to today start the prosecution. What would satisfy you today? In other words, would if they just say we will go ahead, but we're not ready yet, would that stem the tide of violence this weekend? Or I know Congressman Black.
Make no mistake. We as elected members of Congress, leaders in our communities, cannot satisfy America that we can say something or do something and have credibility that will keep people quiet. And I'm not going to lead anybody to believe that I have that power and influence given what has just taken place. What has taken place is this jury has said to America, to leadership, to everybody, there's something in this system that allows a change of venue, basically an all-white jury, to tell you you have not seen what you saw. And that despite the fact that there's a video, we can come together and decide that there should be no convictions, that there's no guilt in this matter. So to ask us to say to young people, have faith in the system at this particular point in time is very difficult. I think I have more credibility and want to maintain more credibility than that. What I'm saying to the Justice Department and to the President is, you can be helpful because you are the people who have a lot of power in these matters. The President has the power of leadership. The Justice Department has the power beyond what has been done to prosecute under the civil rights laws. You get on television. You meet with mayors and leaders around this country and assure them that you're going to take this matter up. What Barr said to us, the Attorney General, was they have to wait until after the local jurisdiction has made its decision. That took place last night. Now they have the possibility of entering. In order to enter, they have to do a number of things in the collection of the data and the subpoenaing and what have you. They assured us they understood the warning that we were giving them, that this country was at risk and they would move with all due haste. What would satisfy me is if he could have said to me today, okay, they have completed their work, I'm ready now to prosecute. But he cannot give me an insurance that it would be done in the next 24 or 48 hours. All he could give me is that he would move in all due haste. Yes.
Congressman Blackwell, I was curious about your reaction to that too. If that's all that Barr is going to say, are you worried about your own? I know Philadelphia is also.
I'm worried.
If you could step back.
Yes. I'm worried that we can escalate this thing. I like to keep it in perspective. We had 4 policemen who violated the law, 4 policemen who beat a man, and he said he was in control of his beating. We do not want our youngsters fighting in the streets. We don't want our youngsters burning down places. We have to provide some leadership now. If the Black Congress has to go to California, we ought to go. If the President has to go, he ought to go. We're to get in those streets and tell these youngsters, we do not condone this. The courts did this. We're going to try to straighten it out. But to have violence, to burn it down, we have had these kinds of things before. Little old ladies couldn't get their medicine, couldn't get food, couldn't get water. Do not want to see it happen again. We've gone through that. This is outrageous. I support Maxine in everything that she's doing, but we're trying to keep the lid on, too.
But when Wood Barr's comments today that he's not actually announcing today that they're going to start...
Well, I do not believe that we should wait for one person to do anything. We are leaders. We have to lead. We have to make sure that our people are not hurt. We have to make sure that no youngsters are killed because of this in the street while they're rioting. We have a serious problem on our hands. The President's not doing anything, and right now we're not doing anything. Maxine is trying to do it. The time is wasting. We have to get out there and make sure that we calm the waters.
Can I just add this? You got a situation, and you all know it too, where we have had people elected to office based on racial division. I know we got people now, including the President of the United States, is going to try to capitalize and get people out to support him for re-election based on the division among races. God knows we need to not have this happen. We don't need to have it happen. When we got Dukeism on the rise, he isn't running for president, they tell me, anymore. But the kind of philosophy and the preachings he's come forth with is certainly much on the agenda of many people who are running for office. And I do hope, as one member of the Black Caucus, we go out and show those people in Los Angeles that we are with you to try to make the justice system do what it should do. This is not the way to do it the way you're doing it, though.
Congresswoman, or whoever wants to answer this, even before the trial, do you believe there's been a sort of a hysteria about crime in this country that has led the incarceration rate we see among black males and that entire situation, and has led people to believe, well, whatever the police officers did, they're police officers and we really need them, because there's this hysteria wrapped up and crime has been built up?
There's not just a hysteria about crime. There's institutionalized racism in the criminal justice system. The disproportionate numbers of black males that are in prisons around this country are in prisons because they don't have the wealth by which to get fancy lawyers who will go in and ensure that they buy justice for them, as white folks can do in America. That's why black males are in prison disproportionately. Beyond that, over the past 12 years, we have had signals from on high, at the highest levels of government, with the Reagan and Bush administration, that with a wink and a nod tells people it's all right to be against affirmative action. It's all right to be racist, in fact. Let me just tell you, David Duke did not rise in a vacuum. The polarization and the politics of separation and division that have taken place, i.e. the Willie Horton campaign, i.e. other kinds of things similar to that, a Justice Department that's entered in certain kinds of cases, has helped to create an environment of separation and division. When you hear the jurors talk about someone who caused this beating himself, when you hear them talk about they could have stopped it, as was mentioned before, when they hear them describe this menacing black man who was big and strong, and one officer talk about his grunts like an animal, you're talking about racism. You're talking about the kind of racism that would lead a jury to say this man is less than human, and he got what he deserved, and that was all right. You're really talking about, and I don't want us to get away from it. We can't get away from this terrible, ugly description of institutionalized racism, because until we confront it in America and understand that we have to have an appreciation for diversity and leadership that helps people come together and learn to live with each other, we'll miss the point.
Address that. Excuse me.
Just one point. You talk about the hysteria of crime. It is not a question of just hysteria of crime. It is the presentation of an image that black people actually commit these acts and that no other persons do. I have visited the prisons, Sing Sing and Brooklyn House of Detention, Queens House. Those black men there tell me that the problem has to do with the criminal justice system, beginning with the fact that in most urban black communities, there are very few black police officers, so that their conception of what the police force is that it is an occupation army, so that there is a disproportionate number of arrests, even for the most minor misdemeanor. And then they go into the system, and there are the legal aid lawyers who are oversubscribed in the number of cases they're responsible for. So the first thing they do is tell them to plea to a felony. So now they are taken out of ultimate competition in any kind of way because they're 17, 18 years of age. They already have a felony. Now, building on that felony is any other crime, no matter how minor it is, it goes, what they do is trace back to that initial felony. So they're taken from any competition, whether it is when they get ready to go to grad school, whether they get to compete for jobs, whether they want to go and take civil service examinations. Then they go into the prisons themselves, where there is no rehabilitation mechanisms. They come out of the prison, they go into the probation system. In the probation system, they they are not encouraged to be able to lead lives that will cut down on the possibility of recidivism, but rather they are almost encouraged to commit another act of crime by probation officers who say to them, when they could say, come and see us once a month because you have a job, we'll tell them to come once a week when they have to take time off, so they become a liability to the employer, and therefore ultimately they lose those jobs, and before long they go back into the system. And we continually present this image that black folk commit crimes, therefore they ought to be treated differently within the justice system.
I was just going to say, in terms of the hysteria, and I doubt if you'll write this or run this, but you ought to look at your own networks, your own newspapers. I mean, over 50%, just about 56, 57, 58% of the drug users in this country are white Americans. But when you look at the 6 o'clock news and the daily newscast around this country, who do you see being arrested? You see young blacks in urban areas. Even in Minnesota, a judge had to rule that if one is arrested with crack cocaine or rock cocaine, and they would get a stiffer penalty versus a suburbanite who's arrested with powder cocaine. Cocaine is cocaine, does the same thing to you. That is racist. Sometimes your own networks, your own newspapers whip up this hysteria. I suggest to you that you check your own home before you start talking about the hysteria from our end and what we should be doing to eliminate it. You're just as responsible, and if you go back and look at the Kerner Commission report and read what they say in reference to the police departments of our country and what they also say in reference to the news media in this country, you'll see not much has changed in the many years that the Kerner report was issued.
All right, we're going to wrap this up. This is the last question.
When are you going back to your district, and what are you going to do?
This afternoon.
What are you going to do when you get there?
I will be on the street. I will be talking with young people. I encourage protest. I encourage sensible protest. I will try and make sure that we tell people they must avoid violence, but I encourage protest. I think we cannot allow this decision to go in silence. So I will be back working with my community, working with young people, continuing to have all of the community understand they must impress upon the Justice Department and the President that they've got to go for prosecution in this matter. That will be helpful, and everything else that we can do. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Members of the Congressional Black Caucus met later in the day with reporters to voice their reaction to the jury's verdict and the aftermath. Next, we bring you their remarks.
I'm Congressman Ed Towns, chairman of the Congressional Black Caucus. Yesterday, America witnessed a terrible travesty of justice. The jury verdict in the Rodney King incident amounts to a total violation of basic human and civil rights. It represents the manifestation of prejudice and racism in their worst forms. We, the Congressional Black Caucus, want America to know that this is not a standard of justice that we will permit to be perpetuated on the innocent people of this nation. When police officers use their law enforcement authority to inflict illegal and violent acts on African Americans or any citizens, it becomes the imperative of the community and people of conscience to stand up in opposition. We stand today with our congressional colleagues from California and around this nation, demanding justice and an end to police harassment and brutality, and the implementation of policies to forever